Welcome everyone to our latest webinar, the International Governance and Compliance Association's latest webinar, part of our webinar series. Today we're discussing a very fascinating, I guess, trending topic. We're talking about compliance in the fintech world. Before introducing our two panelists, let me actually get some admin issues out of the way. We are recording this session, so we will have a video recording of the webinar and also a full transcript that will be available within a few weeks. Also, if you have any questions for a panelist as you listen to them, enlighten us with all of their knowledge on this topic, make sure to enter the questions using the chat below, and I will try to work the questions into the discussion. I will be moderating on behalf of IGCA. So that's all for now from my end. So without further ado, I'd like first Mona to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her career, her profession, and what fascinates her about compliance in fintech. Mona?
Great, thank you, Matteo, and thanks for having me today. And yeah, I started my career actually in compliance more than 20 years ago in the Netherlands. Worked for one of the largest banks at that time, and at that time compliance had, of course, a totally different meaning. I guess this was before 9/11 as well. So especially in the Netherlands, it didn't really mean that much, and for me also not. So I rolled in it a little bit. But moving on, I moved to Asia and worked for quite a few years within different banks, within the risk management and compliance areas as well. So you could say I have seen quite a bit what's happening in Asia, what the pain points are, what the different infrastructure is in different countries. And to make the ball roll, I actually also went to the US and worked for a couple of years in risk management compliance within New York and in Boston. So, and then I thought, okay, I have seen it all. I've seen two financial crises. I really want to do something else. I would like to become an entrepreneur and make a difference that way. So in 2014, I started with my own company, which was in the first place was more in risk management compliance, advisory services and training. But that changed quite quickly because the Singapore government, where we are based, was pretty much busy with trying to digitalize already quite a bit. They had quite a few years plan to do that. 2020 needed to be a totally digitalized society in a certain way. And I found it very interesting, especially from a technology perspective, because when I was working in compliance and when I was in the banking world, we had those pain points with client onboarding, with transaction monitoring, risk management, advisory as a whole, reporting. But there were not that many great tools on the market, and if they were also quite expensive. So and sometimes you needed to have a lot of workarounds, which make it actually more cumbersome than interesting. But yeah, fast forward. Around 2014, Singapore became pretty much a little bit of a fintech hype, in the sense of with the Fintech Festival and building the ecosystem. And that's what we tried to do then as well with the Record Revolution. And that's the company that I set up 4 years ago. And we built the ecosystem. We help companies to expand into Southeast Asia and Asia Pac. Who are already a little bit more matured, and we have a training program and building a digital platform for matchmaking and advisory services as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mona, for that introduction. Rami?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be with you and with Mona, and welcome for everyone. My name is Rami Al-Damati. I am from Jordan originally and based in Dubai. Actually, I start my career in cybersecurity. I have more than experience, like more than 20 years in this field. And when the emerging technologies start getting right in the 2000, let's say 10 and 11 and so on, I start get interested in these technologies, especially in the cryptocurrency and this domain. But I found that this domain, it needs a lot of attention because of my experience in the cybersecurity. So I start emerging my experience with this, let's say, innovation technology or trendy technologies like blockchain, fintech, AI, and see how we can formalize these relations between these technologies and the cybersecurity, because definitely any emerging technology need more attentions in the part of the cybersecurity. And there is a lot of compliance was in the cybersecurity. We was working on it, and we do it for many company, for regulations, for regulatory, for building operation centers and all of this stuff. And there is some similarities when we talk about the financial sector, and there is many regulations need also to be care about, especially when we talk today about some topics. We will find that there is a conjunctions between the regulation technology, the fintechs, and the cybersecurity, and the threats that facing this domain. I've been working with multiple multinational companies in the cybersecurity, and now working with many companies in the blockchain exchanges systems team, building the education system for them, or the compliance and the AML, let's say, vision for them. Also working with multiple institutions in order to comply and help how to let's say, building the harmony between the domain, the innovation domain, with the secure domain, secure the clients, and the regulations, fit with the regulations. I built my startup in 2019, December 2019. It's called Al-Barza platform. It's a platform that link between all people with the skills in emerging technology, blockchain, cybersecurity, AI, fintech, and all of these, make them one network, do educations, do networking, event, conferences, and so on, with collaboration with multiple team and partner within the regions to help or make a centric location for it, knowledge for these, and supporting local languages like Arabic and English within our region, Middle East and Africa region. For that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rami. What fascinates me about this discussion that we're going to have is we're covering very, very large areas of the world. I mean, Mona has expertise in Europe and Southeast Asia. Rami can handle the Middle East, and we have a very good kind of perspective of what things are happening in these areas of the world. And at the same time, we have the focus on the financial services and cybersecurity. So it's going to be a well-rounded discussion, I believe. I have about 6 questions here. We're going to kind of work our way through these. We'll be, answering them within the next 50 minutes to an hour. But to kick things off, part of what IGCA does is we like to look at the past, present, and future of things. So let's start from the past and work our way towards the present and the future. So a question to actually get us started is, how has compliance for fintech companies evolved during the past decade? Mona, do you want to get us started with your experience, and you kind of walk us through the history, I guess, of compliance in fintech?
Sure. Yeah, I think, to be fair, from my point of view, 10 years ago, compliance or fintech didn't exist that much, at least not in the buzzword way as that we know it these days, right? I mean, of course, there were already products back then, just after the financial crisis, that people tried to come up with something which made it more, I guess, sustainable than it used to be before, because of the whole risk management part was not really working anymore. However, I think we need to differentiate quite a bit, because my idea is also not RegTech and FinTech are not the same. Mm-hmm. So if I talk about RegTech, I really mean software solutions for the regulatory environment. And that is actually more an enabler for the financial institutions or whoever needs RegTech solutions. Whereas if we talk about fintech companies, then we talk about the payment and the products that can be actually outside of the banking world by itself. But of course, it can also be integrated in that. So I think there is a bit of a difference in definitions there from different professionals, let's put it that way. But if I just go after my own hunch, then I would say RegTech, of course, didn't exist at 10 years ago, not again in the buzzword sense. Of course, there were already companies that were trying to automate processes, manual processes, repetitive processes from a back office or a compliance perspective, especially for large banks and etc. But the products were still really in their infancy, right? I mean, those products are now actually products that are going to extend into Asia, for instance, from Ireland or from Switzerland, etc. So for me, I think, you know, if you talk about past fintech 10 years ago, for me, it was almost non-existent.
Okay, thank you, Mona. Rami, what's your perspective on, you know, fintech and compliance in the past decade and how it has evolved?
Yeah, actually, as Mona said, that this terminology is already, it's old, but it's evolving with the time because of the evolving of the technology itself. We can keep seeing that a new innovation way to avoid interacting with banking or to solve the problem that happened during the crisis, financial crisis itself. But this increased the problem itself in terms of the regulation technology. So there was, they start doing or keep focusing on doing integration with multiple technology together. Let's say using the AI, using the maybe the blockchain or something like this, and moving from approach, know your customer, to know your data, in order to do more analyze for the customer themselves, creating maybe a generic or let's say country-based sandboxing for regularities, seeing many interactions between or working harmony starting between the startups itself, because the startup, they start increasing with the time, the last maybe 10 years with these new technologies, because previously was the companies, the banks, they generate the product, the engagement, but now is the startup, is the market and the industry, and this type of engagement between both parties with the specific regulations, or with the startup, let's say he create his own compliance and try to embed it with the existing system, with the companies or with the local countries. I believe it is evolving together step by step. We can see that there is many of engagements happening at the current time, more centric together than previously. Yes.
Thank you, Rami. Okay, that kind of covers, you know, kind of sets the ground for the rest of our discussion and kind of provides a panorama as to, you know, where fintech is right now or has actually moved to. So now let's look at, let's say, the present of fintech and compliance. And I have here about 4 questions to kind of focus on that. The first one is, you know, what are some of the best practices for fintech companies when it comes to compliance? Okay, we're talking about best practices. You know, just to make it easy on you guys, how about you give us each 3 best practices that you think, you know, every single fintech company out there should actually follow when it comes to compliance. Rami, do you want to give us your 3 first?
Yes, I believe one of them is best practices is focus on the customer and focus on the data itself for this customer again, and keep the consumers in mind itself. And let's say another use is focusing on the AML compliance itself, because fintechs is too much comply. It needs to be too much comply with the AML compliances itself and FinCEN regulations and so on. So it needs to be more engaged with this one and plan ahead for the future, what is required with the future, and comply with local regulations together, or build a local regulation together as well. Maybe there's some of use cases that can be dealt.
Yeah, we'll get some of the case studies a bit later in the discussion. I know each one of you has prepared a few of interesting cases in terms of compliance and fintech. And Mona, what would be your 3 best practices? And you can build on what Rami has said too.
I do think that I can only add to what Rami just said, because I think one of the things that we've seen quite a bit with fintech companies is that they, especially in Asia, that they try to come up with a product which is really cool based upon a technology without really knowing whether that is really market fit for the company that actually wants to partner up with it, right? So that there is something that I would say sometimes there is a mismatch in the products that are out there in the world or in Asia, and whether that is really market fit with a financial institution or a bank, because it, for instance, doesn't gel well with the systems that are already there. It might be that there is no data, or they haven't used any data so that they can't. It might be a lot of issues around it. So there are some examples there as well, what the challenges are in a way of implementation and stuff like that. I think that is the other one that fintech companies sometimes forget, because if you build a product and you want to, of course, sell. And you try to sell 9 of the 10 times, you try to oversell it, or you oversell it and you can't deliver, or you oversell it and it takes a while before it actually can be implemented, or you haven't asked the right questions, or you didn't have the right people at the right table. So there are, from an implementation perspective, I think also quite some areas that are sometimes a mismatch. And then the third, I would say, now I think that Rami already mentioned that as well, but I think if you really want to be successful, you need to make sure that your technology and the whole ecosystem, or not the ecosystem, but the right professionals are in the right place. And although the technology is super important, the people are super important too. And you very often you see tech companies that actually only have very great talent in technology, but you really don't know what actually from the business side, or from the other side, or from the other persons that are also super important to provide the right kind of information to make that product really market fit as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mona. Now let's look now at, every single company in the world has to deal with regulatory authorities. A company, whether you're in Dubai, Singapore, the Netherlands, regulatory authorities are going to be there, and there's certain things you have to comply with. And now, if we talk in the case of fintech companies, this is of course going to be a lot broader because it applies to all companies. But how important is it to establish solid relationships with regulatory authorities in your pertinent jurisdictions? Mona, you want to get us started there, talking about maybe setting solid relationships with regulatory authorities in Singapore, the Netherlands. So what has been your experience in that sense?
Yeah, for me, my experience has been that it is super important to have actually a good relationship with the regulators in your region or in your country, and not only with them, but also connecting the dots regionally and globally. That's what we started to do as well when we started the platform. We really interacted with the Fintech Festival, which in the first place was not that big, and not only in the Fintech Festival, but whenever we had a smaller event, thought leadership, whether it was a roundtable or whether it was a bigger event specifically for a certain industry problem, we actually always connected with the regulator, and we built quite a good relationship with them. And the good thing is that gives also for the fintechs a bit of credibility, because if you have a panel and the regulator is also at the table and can answer questions as well from the one side of the world and the other side of the world, that makes, of course, a huge difference. And afterwards, they are more open to talk to you as well as a solution provider. That also helps, of course. And especially with our acceleration program, we also, whenever there a solution comes our way, we try to they won't ever say to the company, okay, the financial institutions need to buy your product. That's not the regulator's task in a certain way. But they would, say, what do you need? What is difficult for you to do at the moment, because you are and maybe you're in scale up a startup. And to be fair, in Singapore, they're quite open to it with the fintech department. And I do know that there are other parts of the world that is a little bit more difficult sometimes, but I think it is super important to have a good relationship with the regulator.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Rami, what's your take on this? And then I have a question, a very good question that came from the audience that I'll work in. But Rami, get us started with that.
Sure. I believe the first thing I can see it maybe mainly in Dubai because the government is supporting these type of initiatives and the engagement, and because they are regulating and do this one, which is the country strategy or the formalize the strategy itself in the country to be more logical, transparent, well coordinated manner through practices, process, toolkits, all of these things. And this really will help the relations between them to be known. And if I want to engage with them, I know what I need to do, what I have as a regulator is theirs. Also manage the frequent meetings. Not only meeting with the regulator, with multiple area of them, maybe doing like multiple engagement, multiple conferences or sessions to help do main brainstorming in this part, which is really will help do this type of let's say ice breaking between the regularity and the maybe startup, maybe with the banks itself or the others. Also the doing like centralize something like centralize the documents that can be shared between them. So they, if one entity share or create a research or did an article or something, they need to be a platform that available. Everyone have the access to it, so everyone can understand each party how it's working, what is the idea in the market, how things can be done correctly. These, I think, that maybe three main areas that can be done additional to what Mona has been mentioned as well.
Thank you. And we have a related question here. I'll ask Mona to kind of share her experience first and then go to Rami. But basically the question is, how willing are regulators to engage with the development of new software? I mean, do regulators actually actively participating and, offering suggestions to companies and, to kind of work the regulations as the product is being developed or something along those lines? Mona, what's your experience with that?
I think that is a little bit too much of an utopia that the regulator is in front of the technology. I think that is very difficult to say anywhere because it's also a relatively traditional body, right? I know in Singapore, like I said, it is a little bit, you have the traditional regulator and you have the fintech department, and the fintech department is of course much younger than the traditional regulator. So it is a little bit divided, although there is one central bank. So from that perspective, if you talk about technology, I must say Singapore has always been very forthcoming and always also, for instance, the travel rule, Rami, I think you probably know about it. That was a combination of Access, which is the local blockchain association, together with the regulator and with a few other industry specialists to come up with the regulation around it, right? So there are quite some engagement within the MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, to actually support initiatives, I would say. I would not say that they are going to sit in a panel and say upfront, okay, we think you guys need to do X, Y, or Z in the tech space, or this is what we need. What they do for themselves as like supervisory technology, they do look at technology again in the world, that what is interesting for us to actually be able to be a common project as well. And they engage then, of course, external vendors to come up with, to transform themselves as well. But that's a different discussion, I guess.
What about in the Netherlands or in Europe? What's your experience there? Different?
Yeah, to be fair, even the UK, as far as I know, and from communications, I would always have believed that they are much further in that whole process. But to be fair, it is 9 of the 10 times much more bureaucratic than, to be fair, in Singapore. But that's also because in Singapore you have the division. I mean, they are very open to talk to you. It doesn't mean that that you immediately get what you want, but at least you get a conversation. In the Netherlands and also in the UK, even, it's very difficult as a fintech company to actually really go through that process already. I'm not saying it's not happening, but less. as far as I.
The person who actually asked the question, he added a comment to here. The comment basically says that the UK regulator will provide active advice to the development team to help them ensure that all the bases are covered, and also the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, provides a sandbox, I guess, where discussions can be had. So
that's true. That's true.
Rami, what's your experience in Dubai in terms of the regulator participating actively in the development of new products, or kind of influencing the path that product takes?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the previous questions, is when you have the strategy, you formalize it, and you have all the toolkits, all the process, the procedures that everyone need to follow, read about it, follow, and see it. So this is the first baseline of engagement. Then the program of maybe incubators, encapsulators, all of these programs that built within the country itself, it's follow all of these type of things. And even the advisory from this regulator, they are part of the mentorship programs. So they are making sure that any fintech, or let's say any startup going out from these programs, he already know about these compliance, he know about these regulations, the local sandbox itself, and how to utilize whatever is part of it. They are trying, to be they are trying to make the startup success before they are going to the market, because they care about the success rate itself. We don't need to everyone play in different area, and when they come to the market, they face the regulations, they face the fines, they close at the end. So they need to make sure that they are part of these steps, regulations. Then they go to the market very easy and go together most of the times in that part, which is very important factor between the development stage and the regulator stage itself.
Yeah, but I want to say something about that, because that is definitely not what's happening in Singapore, right? So in Asia, they don't help with, I mean, whatever is meant with helping the development team, is that the development team for the products for regulators themselves? Because that, of course, for instance, in Singapore, that just happens behind closed doors. There's always an announcement with the Fintech Festival about the projects that have been done for open banking and all that kind of stuff. But that happens all behind closed doors. So, but then if you're talking about helping fintechs, the regulator helps fintechs with the development teams. Well, that's definitely not happening in Singapore, as far as I know, because that the regulator would say that is not our task. I mean, we just want to see whatever vendor comes along, is it an interesting one? And we will also be happy to, to support that the new technology is coming along and that they might be interested in some banks in our region, but that's it more or less. So there is some differences in, I guess, the regions, what we mean with the engagement or the development teams. I'm not saying that it is less best in Singapore. I'm just saying the approach is different.
Thank you, Mona. Now, moving on now, I know, Mona, you already discussed kind of the differences between RegTech and FinTech, and kind of set apart the two, two areas and define them. And this question has to kind of brings both of them together. And the question is basically, what role is currently being played by RegTech in helping fintech companies remain compliant? I mean, RegTech has made a huge splash in the financial services sector in terms of helping companies report and monitor transactions and whatnot. How has it been adapted by fintech companies? Rami, do you want to get us started with that one?
I think if we talk about the RegTech and how it should be applied within maybe the software, maybe the startup itself. They as Mona mentioned, that they need to come with their own prospect to the market, and the regulator, they will see how they can help, or they can maybe customize this one. So there is many things that help them to be compliant, like transparent in the data management itself, the risk assessment part, the adaptability itself. I think this area that need to be covered or focused with these companies before they interact with the RegTech, because RegTech definitely they will intercept with them and they will start discuss many of areas, how you do this, how you comply with this, how you apply this. So they need to be examine it ready before they start. They need to understand the RegTech definitely and build their model and then return back and see how it can be work definitely for that.
Thank you. Mona?
Yeah, I think, of course, RegTech is a huge addition for fintechs, right? Because fintechs are already also tech companies with emerging market technology in principle. And what the RegTech companies would do is just automate also the regulatory side a little bit. Right. And that can be like the KYC part, that can be the licensing part, if you need to add all the regulations around that, but also what Rami already said, risk assessment, regulatory reporting, all those things. So what you normally, as a traditional company, you would, hire like 10 compliance officers because you need quite some people to do those manual processes. Now, if you can just have like 3 compliance officers and then a tech tool that actually can help you, and that can also be easily implemented because it is a similar kind of technology and you're already a technology company, so you understand it probably better, and also your reporting lines are a little bit less long, let's put it that way, or the sales cycle. So that makes a huge difference. And at the end of the day, it should be cheaper as well. I'm not saying that we're already there, because I know that there are quite a few RegTech solutions that for a fintech or for whatever more smaller company will still be very, very expensive. So I think that is something that is evolving, of course, with the amount of solutions that come on the platform as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think if there is already a big adoption, it is in the bigger fintechs in the first place, because for them it is much more familiar than the more big traditional banks. Although I'm not saying they are not adopting either, especially not given COVID and the ongoing regulatory environment that we're in. But I think the quickness of adoption is more in the fintechs.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mona. So now we get into the fun portion of the. It's been a lot of fun so far, but now we're going to kick it up a notch, and we're going to talk about some case studies. I asked each one of you to kind of pick 1 or 2 interesting case studies of compliance and compliance working in the fintech or not working in the fintech area, and to kind of present that to our audience. Because there's no better way of actually putting theory into practice and kind of realizing what you have to do to remain compliant and whatnot. So Mona, you want to get us started with a case study or 2 that you find interesting, that you find insightful, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So one of the companies that I find super interesting, and they have done it very well in, I think, less than 10 years, is Compliant. It's a UK-based company, and they do KYC. And they
sorry,
are.
Mona, we lost you there for a second. Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat the name of the company, because we lost you there for 1 second? Yeah.
Okay, Compliant Vantage.
Okay.
It's a UK headquartered company. It does KYC as a whole, more or less, monitoring, onboarding, reduction of false positives. So it is pretty much in the AML space, which a lot of companies are still. But they already exist for a few years. But what they did very well is, I know when they were just very small, there's like 10 people in London, and within quite a few years' time, they are now Series C. They grew to 300 people in London, and they have offices all over the world. And they have great partnerships, right? The most recent one was with Goldman Sachs. So I think, from that perspective, that is one of the cases that I think is huge successful. And the guys started pretty much at from his room in the university. The other one is the partnership with Silent 8. That's with Stan Chart in Singapore. This is in Singapore. They actually were awarded an award 4 years ago by MAS with the Fintech Festival. But they were back then also very, very small. They are in the same area as using artificial intelligence to actually come up with a reduction of false positives. But it's a huge problem within the financial institutions. And they also work their way up in the sense of the partnership with a huge company or financial institution, and they're still gaining more and more attraction, and so they are sort of super success story. So I stop here because I know much more, but I think Remy has a few as well.
Rami, some case studies that you find interesting in the fintech and compliance world?
Yeah, I work with because I'm working in the consulting phase. I'm not in the implementation part itself, but I engage with one of the project with one of the small government entities in Dubai. They was asking to do like the payment system itself, how it can be a transition to be, let's say, between P2P directly, and how they can monitor the transactions without have the in the middle, let's say, transactions or go to the banks or something, and utilizing the maybe the AI, the IoT, the blockchain technologies somehow, and how they can write a specific engagement or let's say a workflow between these type of engagement between the customer to customer or business to business, and avoid whatever is not regulated, like the AML or the any other regulations within the KYC, or to engage them with these part of things. I saw that when we started, it is a little bit complicated because you need to engage multiple technologies, multiple area, and definitely this is the future, I believe, in the maybe coming years, that if you want to really make an effective program or fintech application, that you need really to use analytics by the AI, maybe with integration with the IoT, storing the database in the blockchain with the smart contract, automation of the process, all of these. So we try to bring all the main functionality that can be helped from each technology. I don't need to take everything, it's only to a specific, with consideration with the compliance of integrating people transactions, and how it can be checked with the policy, with the let's say even do more analytics previous customer itself or the user before they do the process itself. So it need to be more deep integration with the let's say the AI analytics itself, and go to big data, summarize all the data to understand the profile, or make a profiling for the users before they engage with any transactions. So these type of things is little bit, we give like a high level information about how it can be done, how you can utilize these features, how you can integrate this part of areas. Then we saw that when it's go to the R&D team or development team, they start going with integrating the AI blockchain, let's say, together, see how they can develop workflow here. They go to the financial part, try to segregate some area that they don't need to keep using it, just do the analytics, get the data from the users, and go directly using it. So I believe this is something on a higher level, not on a specific, but I think it will show us where the future is focusing, or predicting the futures of these type of technologies when it is working all together. Yeah.
Thank you, Rami. Well, any specific case studies on what not to do in compliance in fintech? Is there anything that you can tell our listeners that, I guess it's wrong or that it's not a good idea. Mona, anything that pops into your mind?
Yeah, I think I already mentioned it a little bit, but I can elaborate on that. I think really the silo kind of solutions are the less ones that are sellable, right? So because at the end of the day, nobody wants to have like 5 different products and pay for them as well and try to integrate that as well. So it is more about the platform plays. It is more about the end-to-end kind of solutions. And of course, nobody has them perfectly at the moment already,
Right.
but there are some platforms that actually can very easily be integrated comparing to other ones. So I would definitely go for the customizable kind of technology, as well as that you can, especially in the RegTech space, that you can actually, when you go into a new market, that you can change it, tweak it around so that it actually fits that market as well, instead of just trying to come up with a static solution and then and then it fits one purpose, but probably not all of the problems you had. So that's something that I think is super important.
Rami, anything, warnings or what you think is not a good idea for compliance in fintech?
Yeah, I believe maybe continuing to what Mona mentioned is I don't need to create maybe from my point of view, I don't need to create something innovated, but I need to fix the existing problem itself in order to comply and continue with it. But caring about the compliance is a major part for that, because we seeing a lot of product is coming to market is not fit with the compliance because they don't take care about this part. They thought that when I create my own regulations or compliance part and I will go to market and discuss it, I will find a lot of acceptance because I solved this problem. But taking care of the other parties and all the regulations is very important, and it's not easy to be changed in legacy systems or legacy countries, especially maybe in our region as well.
Thank you, Rami. So before hitting our concluding remarks and wrapping up the webinar, we still have about 15 minutes left, so we have plenty of time. Let's look into the future. And basically, the question is, what do you foresee for compliance in the fintech world as we move into the second half of the 21st century? What is the future like for fintech and compliance moving forward? And Rami, do you want to get us started there?
I mentioned it like very fast in the use case that I believe they need to rely a lot on the data itself, like moving from KYC to KYD, analytics of the user itself, like what is in Alibaba payment or in China. They are doing a full analytics about the user behavior in the whatever areas, and they give them the loan within few minutes or something like this. The data is the important part to focus on data, how to analytics, and how to save it. Cybersecurity is the major part in this area, because if you comply, if you have good software, but you have weak database or weak platform infrastructures, definitely you'll be under hack. Under hack meaning compliance, fines, and all of these stuff things. And the part of the startup for these days, they don't need to build the infrastructure. They can go to the infrastructure as a service or anything as a service, but they need to select it correctly in order to comply and go fast to the market and solve the most important issues in their idea. That's all.
Thank you, Rami. Mona, what's your vision for the future?
Yeah, I think we're more or less midway. I think I answered this question as well a few weeks ago with the RegTech Black Book that we wrote an article about. So for me, there are two things. One is within the financial services industry, where do we see us more or less end up and how far are we there? I would say in the first place, now we are already getting there with certain areas, like we already mentioned KYC, AML. There are certain areas that everybody is jumping on, like, okay, we need to have another different kind of solution, less manual processes, etc. And there are solutions out there that are already quite good. What we, of course, even more would like to see is, of course, that there is much more forward thinking into it, so that you can actually not only meet the requirements, but in principle also make predictions on certain data that is out there, so that you actually can prevent risks from happening instead of just only, mitigate those risks, whether it's enterprise or department or whatever. That is, of course, I guess, from that perspective, on utopia, where we not totally are yet. But I also see another line, and that is pretty much RegTech or Fintech, more RegTech beyond the financial services industry. And then, I mean, from my perspective, the digitalization and digital transformation within the regulatory space is relatively early stage. Maybe in the financial services world, it has been talked about quite a bit, and we have some use cases already, and it's getting the right direction. But if you look at, for instance, other regulated areas and even unregulated areas as healthcare, as pharmaceutical industry, they have a lot of admin manual processes as well, that if you really would have some use cases there from a tech perspective as well, it would help tremendously in the customer experience too. And I think that is important to acknowledge, that it's not only the financial service world that needs to transform, but that can be the supervisory bodies. So it is a public-private kind of transformation that needs to happen within the regulatory space as well. And that is more the focus that we try to head up as well going forward. But of course, the use case need to be there as well. I mean, companies need to also see that could be an added value. And there's a lot of education that still need to happen from that perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, Mona. We have a couple late questions that just rolled in. I'm going to throw those out there, and then we'll wrap up the discussion. The first one, which maybe Rami can discuss, is I'm really intrigued as to how blockchain technology can facilitate compliance, given that it's a distributed ledger. How can blockchain be applied to compliance, Rami? What are your thoughts on that?
I believe there is a three main area blockchain is important when you implement the DLT itself, which is the governance, the regulations, and the operation structure itself. So the governance, when you implement the private network, trusted, multiple parties, all of these things, it will work with the operation structures itself to avoid all the errors, to avoid any false positive, and see the correct assets, and do the data. When they apply the rules and the smart contracts there, they will do the data transparency rules. Then the regulations will come in order to do to facilitate the assets, the records, avoid any cyber attacks, make the records more transparent, the settlement of the digital tokens or the AYC risk or anything part of it. So this is the three main areas I believe the blockchain it's implement when we implement the DLT and part of the let's say compliance part itself.
Thank you. Mona, any thoughts on blockchain and compliance?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm not a technology person, and well, although I'm very interested in blockchain technology, but to be fair, I think we are still very much in early stage for that as well, although it is very much evolving, but it is an infrastructure, and to get that, to get real great use cases within compliance for that, or in the regulatory space, I think in itself, it is difficult. If you combine it probably with artificial intelligence, there are a few cases that are being experimented now, and they're coming up, the smart contracts, what Rami was already talking about. But it is not like it's already a dish that you can serve, and it is cheap and it is easy to do, and you don't need more money from VCs and whatever, etc. So government bodies, regulators, actually the whole world need to be on the same kind of level of platform to really make that successful, and we're not there yet, but it doesn't mean that it will come, and that so I think that's my stand on compliance and blockchain.
Okay, excellent. And we have one last question here that just popped up too. Is can the panel comment on smartphone apps that extract user data without explicit consent and how this can be controlled? Mona, I see you shaking your head.
Well, I would say just why don't you just ask Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, that kind of question? That has actually all to do with the security part, right? So actually,
Right.
Rami could probably answer that better as well. But yeah, no, I think there's a huge issue. But again, one thing is though, also privacy and security issues are differently dealt with in Asia as a whole, but also in certain countries in Asia as a whole. So from that perspective, if you have very strict privacy rules in, for instance, Europe and certain countries in Asia, and then it differentiates whether it's privacy in the sense of personal information or client data. So there is also a differentiation in, but the way people think about it as well. I mean, in for instance, Singapore, everybody gets everybody's data. And although everybody knows there's a kind of a GDPR in place in Singapore already from 2012 onwards as well, they really don't care about it that much unless there is a huge breach and something needs to happen, right? But on the other hand, if it's about client data, so the bank client data, there is a huge emphasis on. So I just want to say that I think from an Asian perspective, it is people are just not so worried about whether their data is being taken, because to be fair, I think the Singapore government has with everything that is in place from an infrastructure, almost all the data anyway. So but yeah, I mean, is it an issue from a privacy perspective? Yes, I think so, and they should have consent and whatever. But that's at least my. I cannot answer that it's not happening.
Great, Rami, as a cybersecurity expert, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, actually, as Mona said, the baseline is the regulations, the policies that they need to be applied, and as you can see, some companies or most of the companies they don't care until it has happened the problem. So I can see that most important part is related to the people. People, they need to take care about their data, because the data is the oil of the century itself, or the currency itself for the data. If I have the data, I know what you do, what you want, what it is you're in mind. Even Facebook today can predict what you are thinking about from some analytics, previous analytics, and they show you some advertisement based on it. Now, how to control this one? I believe it is depend on the person itself. Don't just install any application. Go to the features, read about the features for each application. Regulations pushed a lot of companies to, or even Apple itself or Android, they ask you to click if to allow to track you or not. You need to take care about this point. See the functions under each application. Under each application, there is many functions. If you don't know it, Google it, read about it, turn it off if you don't use it. All of this area is very important in order to reduce. I don't mention to cut, but reduce, because at the end, even Google listen to your talk in the home and give you advertisement with your search. So it's a fact. We cannot ignore it, but we can reduce it to the minimum from action from our side, not from the application side, the application creator side of the company itself or the regulations itself, because these areas already done, but we need to take care about the human factor itself.
Thank you, Rami. Some concluding remarks. What each one of you thinks our attendees should walk out of this session with? If it's one thought, Mona, what's your one thought? What should the people who are listening walk away from this with?
Yeah. One thought is I wouldn't be afraid for change and for to step up and see what is out there in the space from an RegTech solution perspective. If you are working in compliance, your work is already complicated enough, especially these years, and it's only getting probably more complicated with this whole digital transformation. So I would definitely recommend to attend these kind of things, but also really look out for yourself, like what is out there, what is interesting for me and for my job. How can I know more about the different technologies that are out there, the skill set that I need to have to stay relevant, all that kind of stuff. That's what my 10 cents is.
Excellent. Rami, your 10 cents?
I think I will take one part from Mona, which is the skill set that we need to to focus on it, because this is the future. Every day we hear about new things. New technology come to take human roles like AI, but it's not 100% correct. It's open another doors actually. So we need to search about the another doors in our kids and our graduated people and even older people like us. We need to even keep creative to know what is in the market, what is technology is coming, and how we can inject ourselves. When I was only cybersecurity expert, I start seeing that these technologies need or have a lot of gaps in the cybersecurity, like fintech, AI, blockchain, all of these. I start focusing them, so I start transfer my career from only pure cybersecurity to cybersecurity expert in the emerging technology itself. So this is something I think everyone needs to be focused, and I keep stressing on this point and the additional point that Mona is already added.
That's a great wrap. Actually, here at the office, and talking to recruiters that we know, they say that probably the most in-demand job out there is for developers. I mean, software developers and developers are in very, very high demand to develop all of these technologies and solutions and whatnot. So with that said, I want to thank Mona and Rami for being with us here today. I think we had a great discussion. We answered plenty of questions, and I think we kind of introduced the topic of fintech and compliance to our members. Let me get some admin issues out of the way, and I'll say goodbye to everyone listening in. This webinar has been recorded. We will be issuing the video within the next few days on YouTube and our website. We'll also have a full transcript that we'll share with all of you. If you have any follow-up questions, you can send them to me. I will make sure to send them along to Rami or to Mona, or you can get in touch with them too. So with that said, best of luck with everyone and their compliance obligations and using new technologies, and hope we all stay in touch. Thank you very much, Rami. Thank you, Mona.
Thank you.
And have a good afternoon, I guess.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.